Now to the gang violence on our streets and in our suburbs. As you'll see, gangs of youths from a range of ethnic backgrounds are spreading fear and hate throughout cities right across the country. And while you'd think the authorities would be doing everything they could to eradicate these gangs, alarmingly, they don't even want to acknowledge they exist. And David Richardson has this special investigation.
All I felt was a swarm around me, feet, punches, just lots of contact. I could have been killed. I could have seriously been injured.
There are street gangs that do rule our streets. And they've been allowed to flourish because they're ethnic gangs.
Like a pack of wild animals in a feeding frenzy over a carcass, it's the brutal reality of street life in Australia in 2006. The trouble is, no one wants to admit Australia has a nationwide street gang problem, gang crime driven by race.
The gang that I know of that attacked me, they call themselves the Ethnics. They consist almost up to 300 people, even ages starting from 12 to 18, everyone's involved.
Thomas Burrow is lucky to be alive. The 16-year-old was viciously bashed by a gang of 30 or more. The attack was unprovoked, incredibly vicious, and captured on a mobile phone camera.
Had he not protected himself, I think my son would have died that afternoon. Or worse, could have had severe brain damage, and that's the end of his life.
The gang is based out of the Runcorn High School in Brisbane, a gang based on ethnicity.
I felt bloody angry, to be honest. At the end of the day, if our children can't go off to school and expect to be able to come home without being attacked by a mob of 30 to 35 fellow students, I mean, what the hell is what the hell is this world coming to?
It seems there isn't a suburb in Australia without street gang crime. Authorities like to tell us it's not a problem and it has nothing to do with ethnic backgrounds. That's a lie.
Everything that I've seen about the gang culture here and also in the US, everything's to do with where you come from, your background, your colour, who you align yourself with. So yes, it's all about ethnic crime.
Gang expert and security consultant Brett Stevens has been warning of street gang violence in Australia for the past 10 years. He's seen it all before in America, working with street gangs, and now seeing the same thing here.
Everyone's afraid to mention the fact that certain people from certain societies, certain cultures, which are dysfunctional and at the extreme combat culture based, large numbers of people coming here from those countries, and we're not saying that's the case, that's what's happening.
Well, we've come a long way. This is something I saw across the US in hundreds of ghettos. This is a memorial to a fallen gang member.
Australian gangs have copied the music, the violence, the crime, even the street art.
You see these throughout the US. The unusual part is this is Woolloomooloo, Sydney, we're seeing this in.
This is in southwestern LA.
That's right, but it looks like southwest LA.
But street gang crime is spreading exactly like southwest LA. In Australia's gang capital, Sydney, 10 years ago, gang crime was isolated to just a few sections of the city. Lebanese gangs in the southwest, the Vietnamese 5T in Cabramatta, the Bra Boys on the eastern beaches, Chinese triad gangs in Chinatown, some islander groups in the city's far west. It's now exploded. Southwestern crime has spread like a cancer, the Lebanese gangs massively increasing their territory. While the 5T has been largely crushed, other Vietnamese crime gangs have also increased their holdings, often overlapping with their Lebanese rivals. After the violence at Cronulla, the country's best-known Australian gang, the Bra Boys, spread their influence south. Chinese crime gangs have moved north across the Harbour Bridge, while islander groups took more territory west towards the Blue Mountains.
Southwest Sydney will expand, and it'll become northwest Sydney, and then it'll expand into the other areas. And eventually, just like Los Angeles, 3/4 of the city will be like southwest Sydney, and you'll have the wealthy areas. And the middle class, who can afford it, will pack up and move.
But it's not just a Sydney problem. Every city has street gangs, and gang violence.
Yeah, my wife and I were walking along this path after dinner, and we were approached by a gang of Asians who pulled out a knife.
A quiet walk through a Melbourne park became a horrifying ordeal for Sam Bucciatelli. They were robbed, but Sam believes it could have been much worse.
I think they were out on the prowl that night to provoke these attacks, and I guess we were just unfortunately the first victim.
It's just becoming an unpleasant place to live, and the violence down at the park has actually gotten my wife pretty scared.
Scared enough to leave?
Been talking about it.
Shane Kerr has watched his outer Brisbane suburb taken over by gangs, an average middle-class suburb where almost every house in the street is now protected by security screens, alarms, even mobile security patrols. The local park finally erupted in violence, with 2 teenagers being attacked by up to a dozen Asian gangsters.
And I'd run outside here, come to the fence, and then I could hear like thuds. And from what I understand now, that was a baseball bat's been hit up against these guys' heads.
If Tony just hadn't stepped in, 2 teenage boys could have been killed. But it's not the first time Tony has seen such violence.
February the 12th, 2003, my elder boy Luke was bashed by 12 guys.
For 6 years, the former security guard has kept diaries of everything he's witnessed in the area as gang crime escalated around him.
My son's car was stolen on the 17th of March. That was up on Waller Road.
But Queensland, like Victoria, refuses to admit there is a street gang problem.
Now people are afraid to take their children in the park because these kids down there drinking and smashing bottles all the time and causing problems up there.
Jim's Gold Coast store bears the brunt of revenge attacks from a street gang he stood up to. It's cost him thousands of dollars, but he won't back down. Others have.
I know a good couple that lived up the road here couldn't wait to move out of this area because they had enough of it.
I think there's political pressure on the police to downplay the role of gangs in Australian society.
Criminologist Dr. Paul Wilson consults police on crime. He's seen the gang problem, but is quick to point out Australians are also forming their own gangs. It's not just overseas nationalities. But he can't understand why police deny they exist.
Certainly they've told me privately that there are such things as gangs, police forces and senior police officers in pretty well every state in the country have told me that privately. Now, I think it would be silly to deny that there aren't gangs.
Gang experts believe the problem starts with immigration, a federal government responsibility. But they also believe if something isn't done soon to curb this combat culture, it will be too late.
This is what is really like there out in the real world, okay? And I think Australians have been very naive to believe that by opening the doors that this wouldn't actually come in.
Have we opened Pandora's box?
It's open, well and truly open. And there's a very strong possibility you won't be able to shut it now.
And if you've had problems with gangs in your neighbourhood, we'd like to hear about it. So please leave your details on our website at yahoo7.com.au/Today Tonight, or just give us a call.